Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Grieco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and I am joined for a very special episode, another edition of our Final Fantasy IX Lives podcast series. I am joined by the unscrupulous Chris Zombiepie Redacted. Hello. It's okay. There's only like 15 more Final Fantasy games left.
Don't remind me.
How many discs does that break down to? I guess they stopped measuring them all.
They eventually get their crap together and are able to fit it onto one DVD because they aren't wasting their budget on FMVs that are ultimately pointless to the story.
And then they lost that ability again. It was amazing because for the entire PS1 generation, they figured, okay, and then also that deep voice was Peter Moogle Busby.
Hey, everybody. What's going on? Could you eat a Moogle? I don't think you could eat a Moogle, but you could eat a Chocobo, yeah?
I don't think you want to eat either of them. I think they're both too smart. I think it'd be like eating... One would be like eating a tiny furry person, and the other one would be like eating a dog. I think
Moogles you definitely couldn't. But how smart are Chocobos?
I think like dog level smart.
I'm sorry. I'm still trying to think about this. Which Final Fantasy games are on multiple discs? So 7 is...
7, 8, 9.
Pre-6, 6 and before are all on cartridges.
Yeah.
Yes, they were all single cartridges.
So 7, 8, 9.
Then 10 is not. 10-2 is not. 11, I think maybe the install disc was technically 2, but, you know, it was an MMO, so it had weird... Like, there were expansions, you know, weird stuff. 12 was on one disc. 13, I believe, on the PlayStation discs. The PlayStation 3, I think it was on one disc because they had Blu-rays, but I think on the Xbox it was multiple discs.
It was. It was.
And then there was 13.2 and 13.3 Lightning Returns, which I think...
Wait. So, Final Fantasy is really adamant about the Roman numerals. So yes. If you have something like 13.2, is it 13 II?
No. It's 13...
It's XIII2.
Colon 2. Or hyphen 2.
Gotcha.
We really do need to give Peter like his own Roman numeral podcast like he requested the first time we did this.
Welcome to the Roman numeral cast. X, what's up with that?
There will be a single episode. It'll be 10 minutes long in which I just list the Roman numerals.
They didn't think numbers could get higher than this. All right, so we are here to discuss mainly Disc 2 of Final Fantasy IX. So, without further... Oh, and just a reminder, if you want to get in touch with the show, go ahead at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and you can download episodes there, or you can hit us up with an email at deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. So not at, but deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. So, is there anything... like mechanical that you guys want to get out of the way before we dig into the story?
I just want to return briefly to the Chocobo discussion. Pigs are pretty smart. Smarter than dogs, maybe. People eat pigs.
People do eat pigs. You know, I don't.
So I want to stand up for all those people eating Chocobos out there. I get it.
It's hard out there for some people.
Sometimes you got to eat a Chocobo.
It's hard out there for a Chocobo.
All right, back to the game.
Okay. Any mechanical problems? Anything? Have you guys turned on the active time event system?
No, absolutely not. And what I would say in Disc 2 is the active time events become even more egregious because there are so many levels on Disc 2 where they basically pop off one after another. And kind of like I said in the previous podcast, I feel like the active time events really break the flow of the game and they actually slow down the pace of the plot. What was it in Treno? There were like 4 or 5.
Yeah, there were a lot in Treno.
There were a lot in Treno. There were a lot in the Black Mage Village. There were tons. And I just feel like have maybe 2 in the beginning and then maybe 2 in the end. You don't need to tell me every little bit of the minutia of these environments. And even if you're saying that they're optional, and they are, again, the screen stops and this kind of interface pops up to remind you that there are these events that you can witness, And that is a disruption of my immersion in the game. So I think that they get better in Disc 2, but they happen with such a regularity that I still find them disorienting and counterintuitive to the immersion of the story and the world.
Okay. I think it's a case of poor hierarchization. I don't think 2 categories is sufficient if you want to make them this prominent. Because some of them are interesting, some of them are worthwhile, some of them do advance the story in a significant way. But others are just like, oh man, look at that wacky Kina. What's she doing? So I think if you had maybe something more than just these 2 discrete categories, but at that point maybe you just have a proliferation and it becomes even more cumbersome.
Sure, and I think that you make a strong point where some of them are just, hey, here's a 2-sentence thing, like here's Quina jumping and licking a thing, and that's, well, somewhat funny, and it breaks up the pace. It would be nice if there was some sort of delineation, like if it flashed blue, that means it's real story important, and if it flashes purple, it's funny good times.
And sometimes you don't even know if it's going to be a character that's a part of your party or if it's going to be a one-off character that you will probably never see again in your adventures, or if it's just a secondary expository cast member. And their moments I find to be disappointing and completely out of place. I know that it was kind of nice to see how they unfroze Blank from the evil forest, but when you stop and think about it, that time is being spent for characters that are irrelevant towards the completion of the plot, when the game should be taking more time to flesh out its own characters that are important to the completion of the plot. And
I'm going to go ahead and say you're wrong, because they are important to the completion of the plot. Like, that's the thing that shook me the first couple of times, the first time I played this game, was that I thought all of these characters didn't matter and that their storylines would dead end, because that's what happens in Final Fantasy VIII and VII. The weird side characters do not factor into the final game. Blank and Marcus and Cinna, all of those characters are in the last cutscene. They are all there for the entire length of the story, though they are not as obviously consequential as some of the main cast members. Those characters that they are trying to string through actually do show up.
But showing up is one thing, and it's certainly creative, but actually being a necessary member of the cast or necessary to my enjoyment of watching the progression of the story is another thing. I just feel like a lot of those characters are a diversion of the characters that the game really should be holding in a higher triage.
Higher level.
Too much time is spent on characters that the game doesn't need to spend this time filling out their minutia, their logos, pathos, and ethos.
Sure. And I think what this allows, I agree that if you want a more focused story and with an editor, you would probably end up with a more cohesive piece if you cut some of this stuff out and really dive forward. I don't necessarily. Maybe not
as the religious enforcer of Chekhov's gun, yes, that has always been my gripe with the Final Fantasy series and my take on storytelling in general. I want a clear, cohesive narrative with a simple story that has the plot beats that make it very much coherent. And like I said, I believe in a strict obedience to Chekhov's gun. It shouldn't be in there if it's not entirely necessary for the story. And I know I think maybe it'll be better down the line, but again, it's that idea of diversion. We are spending time with characters that are diverting attention, resources, and time from characters that I think the game should be filling out more.
Sure. And what my response would be is just, it is that additional layer of depth that makes this game so replayable, and it is what allows this game to, I think, be a more well-realized world than the other games in this series.
It creates, it's the world building I don't mind. It's the characters that they choose to use as world building. Why didn't we have an ATE with Bronny that actually gave her a character arc that was clear for me to follow, and why didn't the game have some of the...
Is that
yes, the queen.
Okay.
Wait, how's it properly pronounced?
I always pronounced it Bran, but I don't...
I call it Brawny because she's a big lady, and I thought that it was a pun on, like, actual brawn.
Maybe.
Like she's brawny. But no, I felt like there were gaps in the fossil record in terms of Final Fantasy IX's story that the ATEs could have potentially addressed. Like, we were a solid 10 hours into the game without our initial antagonist, with a actual arc.
Sure. And you'll get more in Disc 3. Like, once they do the antagonist swap, they go all in it with it, which is nice, but it is late.
It is late, and they had plenty of time to fill that gap.
Sure. So with that in mind, why don't we start turning towards the actual... So, Pete, you have some?
Yeah, I have another minor technical complaint. I'm sick of Moogle Mail. I want it to stop.
Oh my god, right? It's the worst, because you have to talk to the Moogle, give them the letter, then you have to talk to them again to find out if they want me to do something. And here's my other problem with the Moogles. They take
Can't eat them.
forever to save your actual game. When you stop and think about the amount of time that you're wasting by not having just be a floating save icon, you have to have the Moogle fly to its spot, open its book up, open up the slot for your thing, select the slot, select the save space, then you have to load it, save it. It adds it's unnecessary. So that you guys,
that one doesn't bother. Is there a payoff to Moogle Mail though? Like, do I get a prize for delivering all the mail?
You do eventually get. So at the end of midway through Disc 3, there is a side quest. So the mail, I don't want to ruin. I don't want to spoil.
Okay,
what's happen with Moogle Mail.
Just tell me I should continue delivering mail.
You should. So you'll keep getting some world building from delivering the mail. You will eventually get a prize. The prize is not like amazing, but it's decent, and you get some funny story stuff.
I don't think I've been doing all of the letters.
That's fine. I think it's just as long as you get the last few letters, I believe that's good enough.
I'll continue to deliver it for the sake of my podcast contribution, but I want to know that I don't support the Moogle Mail system.
Mognet.
Yeah, it's a weird system, but it works.
Where does this rank in terms of the save points are a giant pain in the ass? Mognet versus the save points in Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam.
I mean, the ones in Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam are like 9 pages long each.
I just skipped those, yeah.
You can't. But you can skip them.
Those were worse.
Yes. But those were so funny. Oh, man, I love the save points. I feel like they're making fun of Mognet and some of the bullshit that's in these things. So,
That's that deep.
So this too starts with Steiner and Garnet in the train station, which is another cringy scene where Steiner is still the protector of the princess, and the princess has to keep telling him to shut up and stop being a jackass, but he doesn't stop and never listen to her.
Yep.
And then Black Waltz is here, and then Black Waltz is drunk or on angel dust or something, and then you beat him, and then the story keeps going.
One cool thing about that fight, just in general, it's if Black Waltz kills Marcus and Steiner, he actually then attacks himself because his mission is to take the princess alive, and so he will kill himself.
Huh.
That's a nice move.
Yeah, so that's both...
So basically you can't lose that battle.
No, you can't. You would have to kill Garnet yourself. But the cool thing, I think, is there's a good game design lesson there, because Steiner and Garnet are going to be underleveled because you don't play with them very much on Disc 1. So they built in, just in case you're bad with those characters, are poorly leveled, like the boss will take care of itself, but also it has a nice story tie-in. So I thought that's one of the more cohesive bits of balance with also story design in this game.
But I think the one consequence of that is the parties that you deal with, or your party composition is, and I brought this up last time, but the party composition isn't always balanced. Garnet is the only white mage or healer that you have, And I got into quite a bit of trouble with the party that doesn't have a healer because I had to keep using potions, and I kept running low on potions. And I kept forgetting to buy them before I initiated these dramatic action sequences.
Yeah, so there's ways to rectify that. Freya has a healing ability called Reese's Wind, which you can get from...
Wait, that's what it is?
Yeah, that's a healing ability. That casts regen on all of your party members. So she is like a semi-healer. And Quina, once you get to Cleyra, which is the... So immediately after Southgate... Let's get through Southgate first, but you can make Quina learn a blue magic that heals. So both of them can be kind of crappy healers, but they work. So once you get through Southgate, you escape the Black Waltz, and there's actually a fork in the road that you guys might not have explored, because you can go towards Dolly or you can go towards Treno. You're ostensibly supposed to go towards Treno to get super soft for blank. But if you go towards Dolly, you actually stumble in there as the Black Mage factory is kind of in full swing. So you'll see a lot more people around, and you'll see the factory running. You can't go back down into the factory, but you like the dialogue changes with all the different people in town. So I thought that was a very nice touch. That it's a branching path that you don't need to go down, but they actually went to the trouble of making these characters have another round of dialogue.
I accidentally went into a weird cave that while I was trying to go to Treno. I think it was Quan's.
Oh, Quan's dwelling. Yep.
Yeah, I had the weird option of going there. I saw this hole in the cave, and I thought that was going to be an exit that led to Treno. And I think I picked up one of those Stelazios.
Yep.
And there was a weird hot springs that healed up my party.
Yeah, and did you read any of the stuff in Quan's room or anything like that?
Technically I did, but I was of the perspective during this time where it's like, man, I don't want to read this shit, and I just kind of blew through it and then just was like, fuck this, and I was over back into Treno.
Okay,
I read it.
You read
I
it?
should probably go back.
So that dwelling is actually where Vivi grew up.
Yeah, it's Vivi's adoptive father.
Oh, I should have probably paid attention.
Yeah, and so that section, if you look at the clock in there, it says that it stopped like 1 week before Garnet was abducted. She'll read it and say, like, that's 1 week before I got abducted. And I think that's supposed to imply that that was when Quan died.
Huh.
Or when he...
Interesting.
Or when Vivi left.
Yeah, when Vivi left at the very least.
So Vivi killed him.
Or old age.
Or
starvation.
But mostly Vivi.
Probably Vivi. So you go to Treno. Did you guys have Garnet get mugged?
Yes, I did.
So
I actually followed up that storyline all the way, and I got a power belt.
Yep.
I didn't know you could find that dude. I was just like... So, this and another location, I feel, are very directionless, because I was basically running around in circles in the city, not knowing where I needed to go, and I accidentally ran into the four-armed man.
Yep.
But I really do feel like that you enter this city, it's not very clear where you need to go, and it's very easy for you to get lost and not know where you need to go. And yes, it's kind of funny that she gets robbed, and then if you actually follow up on it, you can get something out of it.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was a nice touch.
It was a nice touch, but I don't know. I felt like Treno was kind of like the slum level of any RPG game ever, and because it feels very confusing in terms of where you need to go, it felt like lost potential to me.
Pete, what did you think, Treno? Anything jump out at you?
Treno? I mean, I didn't go through the whole mugging side plot. I pretty much tried to tear through Treno pretty quickly, to be honest with you.
There were the weird two kids that are communists. That was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My response would be, like, you're pointing out these nice touches, and if I were going to be snide, I would say it's easy to fit in a lot of these snide touches, it's easy to fit in a lot of these nice touches when you've excised so much of the gameplay and you have all this extra space.
Yeah.
That's a snide remark I would make.
That is a pretty good point.
If I was snide.
It's, other than the random encounters, it's a solid 2-3 hours before you have your first significant battle in the game. Disc 1 avoided a lot of conflict in traditional battles, and Disc 2 really...
It's a slow burn. It's a slow
burn, but you're right. Most of the battles that you have happen in the last 2-3 hours of Disc 2.
Yeah. And
what I think is unfortunate is a lot of those battles are the same goddamn character over and over again.
Yeah, so in Treno, you can... There's not a lot of fighting. The only fight that you can have is the weapon store in Treno is actually pretty cool. They have a monster chained up underneath the floor.
Yeah.
And you can fight it. You can
kick
fight
my
it and
ass.
they pay you.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, actually.
So one thing that's cool about Treno, I don't love it as a location. Like, I think that it's a little busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. But it is one of the densest areas with callbacks to earlier Final Fantasy games, and it is like the auction house. If you go in there, almost 90% of the items they are selling in the auction house are key items that are callbacks to earlier games. Like you can buy a rat tail, which is an item from Final Fantasy 1, and then if you talk to some of the nobles that are kind of walking through town, they will ask to buy it from you, and that's actually a money exploit where you can buy it at the auction house for X number of dollars and then sell it to a noble who's like walking down the street for more money. But like there's Une's mirror and Doga's artifact, and some of these items are callbacks to like Final Fantasy 4 and earlier games. So
if I need to
pick up on it, but
if I need to exploit the game to make money, I'll just do the cotton robe synthesis trick.
Yeah, that'll work.
No, you're right. It's an interesting level, but it's very busy. It's hard to figure out where you need to go. I feel like some of the exits and entrances are a little too obscured.
Yeah.
There were a couple of doors, especially on the castle, that I was like, oh, that's probably just a part of the environment. Nope, that's totally an exit to the dungeon that you need to go to find out where the doctor is, because the doctor is in some Byzantine part of this random location that you have to find his house. That took me forever, trying to find Dr. Tott's house.
Yep.
I just...
Yeah, and Treno has it's got a lot of weird payoffs for some side quests. Like the Stelazio woman is there, weird duck woman,
the bird lady.
The bird lady. I didn't know what she was doing, so I gave her my cancer, and then the screen just reads, "Give me your cancer. You've given cancer," and it's like, oh, hey, buddy, I'm done. I'm not going to give the rest of this stuff to you. I only had, like, I think 4, and I haven't been very good about picking up the Stelazios. So Gino, should we pick those all up?
There are definitely great rewards if you pick them all up. You give them to her. That's where they go.
Okay.
There's actually... So, if you get all the Stelazio...
Does it change the story?
It gives you a longer cutscene at the end of the game. It's
really?
A longer final game cutscene.
If there's one thing I need from this game, it's longer cutscenes.
It's like 30 seconds longer. It's not. There's like there's an extra scene or something.
It's like the Golden Scutella mission from Ocarina of Time. I just...
Get that big wallet.
I don't hate it, because every game needs to have the collect all of the random stuff in the environment across the world mission. Everyone has it, so I don't feel especially strong in terms of wanting to criticize it, but it's there. It's a thing.
And most of those Stelazio are on the beaten path, and they're in places you have to. The story forces you to go, so it's not that big of a detour. I like that a lot better than some of the other collectathons that are in other games.
The one thing I would say, and I'm starting to realize it when we talk about the Stelazio, this game has a lot of stuff that's just hidden in the weirdest places. There are like treasure chests that are... No, they're treasure chests that are like hidden in parts of the environment that you would never think to go to unless you had a guide. Like, you have to be completely obscured, like you can't see your actual character, and then the big exclamation mark pops up, and it's like, hey, this is a really powerful dagger. It's so weird that so much stuff, like they basically, every screen that's a part of the dungeon has one thing that you cannot see that's probably hidden. And it's led to this kind of neurotic tendency for me where I have to literally go around in the environment and hit the X button over and over again until I find the one thing that's hidden in the environment. And when there's nothing there, I literally have to look up if there's nothing there.
Yeah, and there is actually a hidden boss in like the last dungeon that is hidden in an area that you can't see, and you have to kind of wander around. They do that stuff weird. Yeah,
that's weird.
I got in so many random battles until this version where I could turn it off because I'd be like looking for this stupid random boss guy, and I don't think the exclamation point even comes over your head, so it's like extra bad. They do some weird stuff with that.
It's almost like they made a game for the crazy people that really, really like them some Final Fantasy. Like, this is for them more than anything
for them. I mean, I think you can get stuff out of it even if you're not that person, but if you are that person, it is catnip. So Treno, you find the super soft. The only thing I would want to add to Treno is just that when you're on... I love how they shoot that section where you're going to get the super soft, where they're kind of on a gondola or something. Not a gondola. What am I thinking? Is it a gondola?
It's kind of a gondola. I'm not going to offend. It's a boat.
Pole boat. Yeah,
it's a pole boat.
Yeah. So you're on a gondola and you're kind of moving through the water, and it does a nice shot of kind of Garnet thinking to herself, and then the camera slides over to Steiner thinking.
Slides over to Steiner, and he actually gets a soliloquy to himself.
Yeah.
He talks to himself. And for me, it took me a while to connect the dots, like, oh shit, does this game have a narrator that I didn't know about? Oh no, wait, this is Steiner thinking to himself.
Yeah, and that kind of gives you... It starts to develop Steiner into having him question his goals. It's very clear that he should be questioning way harder than he is.
And what I would say is he should have been questioning it earlier. And when he finally does break and have his existential crisis, it feels very forced. Like, Steiner, buddy, we should have been thinking this like 2 hours ago. Yeah. Why did this one moment right now cause you to have this existential crisis about what your purpose is?
Well, I could, look, to defend that one at least, it's because of Beatrix. Like, it's her turn that causes Steiner to turn in, like, the ultimate. And let me just say as well, I love fighting Beatrix. Like, in all honesty...
Oh, fuck, I'm the opposite of you then, man. I thought that the first time it was fine in Disc 1, and then the fact that I had to do it 3 goddamn times in a row just spoiled the mystique. And the fact that you can't win those, and the fact that you have to employ the same exact tactics over and over again. You just heal all of your party members.
As someone who has speedrun this,
for the best.
The tactics against Beatrix each time are different, which I find great.
I just like Beatrix. She's probably my favorite character.
Yeah, she's pretty dope. So you find the super soft.
I bet they're going to give Beatrix some bullshit, heavy-handed romance plot with a character that I hate, and then I have to watch this and do some sort of dating scheme or dating minigame bullshit.
I'm not having a Beatrix. She's a Valkyrie.
No comment. So you get the super soft. You head back to Alexandria. Garnet gets immediately captured.
Yeah. That scene sucks.
Yep. That scene sucks a
so
lot.
Dumb. And then the Garganroo. Disc 2 has a rough start. Can we just...
Yeah, it does. It has a slow start. Once you get back to the main quote-unquote party, I think it pops off.
Treno is a rough environment to jump into after watching everyone get massacred in Bermucia. The Gargan Room's not all that much better, and then it plays out comically, and that's the biggest problem that I have is it's just a tonal shift that's the juxtaposition is incredibly awkward. And I don't like Zorn and Thorn. I think they're bad characters. I think the fact that one of them talks like Yoda is just someone who did the translation for this should be punched in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are shit characters.
Oh my god.
Which ones are shit characters?
Zorn and Thorn.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're totally shit characters. I do
so
like their music though.
I like their music, but they're literally just be evil. Just be like the Turks from Final Fantasy VII, where if you're going to have these weird, awkward transitions where they're comical, just don't make them comical 100%. And the fact that they are played for yucks...
Well, to be fair, they're jesters.
Yeah, but they're the worst goddamn jesters ever. Wouldn't it be if... I also want to say that before you get captured by Zorn and Thorn, you have this battle with this underground worm. Yeah. And, yeah. I that's when I realized that Steiner's blood sword is legit. Sword is...
That is on point.
On point.
It's a shame that that thing is only good for like half a second.
Yeah.
It's good for like this level,
a little OP.
And then the next level...
You get a better sword like almost immediately after, but that blood sword, while you have it and it's the best thing, it is so good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
So then we cut back to Zidane and the main
A-team.
A-team.
Yeah.
And we go to Cleyra, the Sandy Treehouse. It is a giant tree surrounded by a sandstorm.
Huracan.
Yeah.
That basically, I guess sometime in the past, some of the rat people of Burmecia splintered off and formed their own peaceful society in this treehouse.
It's a more peaceful version of the Romulans versus, live long and prosper.
Yes. Wait. I don't know. I'm not a Star Trek person. Are the
Really?
Romulans just Vulcans, but
Yeah.
angry?
They were Vulcans that refused to abide by the original traditions of the Vulcan people. So the Vulcans believe in holding their emotions to themselves, and the Romulans believe, no, your emotions make you, and that they should be embraced. So the Vulcans and the Romulans share a common ancestor.
Okay. But, yeah, so that's basically the Cleyra versus Burmecia split. Though it doesn't seem like Burmecia is, super warring either. They're just weird splinter cultures. What do you guys think of Cleyra? The dungeon is a little long.
Oh, man, the puzzle for the Cleyra trunk is miserable. I mean, the whole sand shit and trying to get up into that thing, and I don't think I've played a single puzzle in a Final Fantasy game that I have liked. We've been through 3 games, Gino. 3 games. They've all been bad.
I thought you liked the... Oh, no, you didn't like the puzzle in Ultimecia's castle. You hated that. You didn't like the paintings, right?
Dude, the paintings were terrible.
I mean, RPG puzzles are always sort of low-hanging fruit. I can't think of... Even like Legend of Zelda or something like that. I wouldn't say the puzzles were the reason I played.
But, I mean, in there, the puzzles are at least you using one of your pieces of equipment, and by interacting with the puzzles, you essentially become an expert on that piece of equipment, and that being an expert on that piece of equipment will be the key towards beating...
hit this with a hammer.
But no, usually the one
Sometimes
thing that
it's a boomerang. Watch yourself, Pete.
But the puzzles incentivize your use of that tool, because that tool will almost always be the key towards beating a boss.
Yeah.
So the puzzles provide a scaffold for you. The puzzles here are just an impediment.
Yeah,
they are here. They are here to impede my progress, and I gain nothing from solving them. Yeah, other than I get to move forward.
There's no lesson.
That's what I hate about these Final Fantasy puzzles is they instill no lessons. They help me usually almost never, and they're just designed to where they're almost not puzzles. I mean, there's this one, and then there's the one in the mine where literally you have to hit a bunch of switches until you can get out. These puzzles are just...
Well, they're not really designed to teach you something. They're designed to make you run around the environment and trigger more random battles. Yeah. That's what they're designed to do.
And I got so close to, because my whole thing is I am trying to play this game as if it was released back in the day. So I am, one, not fast forwarding. I'm not disabling random encounters. I'm not doing anything. But I got damn close to disabling random encounters because you have to do so much backtracking in the trunk, and you get lost and you get stuck so often.
The puzzles I can overlook. I don't have it, like, they suck. Nobody's going to dispute that they suck, but I can overlook that in an RPG. The part about this spot that bothered me was when Freya's man rolled in. Turns out he has amnesia. How are we going to resolve this dilemma? Like, what, like a useless bit of fluff to a story that's already overloaded by too many competing plots and subplots.
Yeah.
What's the guy's name?
Yeah.
Fraley? I don't
Fratley.
like Fratley? Whatever it is. I don't like it.
You always know that a subplot is really pining for the stars when it's amnesia.
They're just like star-crossed lovers in general.
Yeah, and I think... So, there's a couple... One, I think that, yeah, the way they handle this plot is bad. She deserves more development than this.
Like, is this a callback to something I missed?
No.
Like, I know I've heard it mentioned, but, like, she's not like a Final Fantasy V character where this romance was developed or something, was it?
No. She is her own character. She thought that the man she loved, like, he vanished one day. He said he was going to fight Beatrix, and then he never comes back. And she
I remember the combo in the tavern.
But actually, he was beaten. I guess he has amnesia either from getting beaten or something happens to him. And her main thing is, like, is it worse for him to be dead or to just be forgotten?
Which would, like, interesting question if it's not buried in this Final Fantasy game, yeah.
Yeah, if the way it was executed was better. If her plot was not resolved at the end of Cleyra, that'd be one thing. But they don't handle it, I think, with the level of respect.
And you kind of brought it up, but it's another Final Fantasy female character who's trying to get her man on. And I feel like that is the fact that happens to more than one character in this story is a damn shame.
Yep. And I think she gets to then, once Fraley or whatever, fuck him, once he's gone, I think she gets to then kind of come into her own and just be kind of this strong knight character. And definitely in Alexandria, she gets to do some powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, she kicks ass.
But I think in Cleyra,
and she can bust a groove pretty good.
She can step. I think the important thing with Cleyra is more what happens to Cleyra. So you get there, Freya
a lot happens.
Yeah, you get there, you get a tour, like you meet this place that is almost idyllic. You can go around, and they are using hydroelectric power, and or not hydroelectric, but they're drawing water up from the ground, and they've got windmills powering everything, and even their items that they sell are a lot better than the things you can get in other places nearby. So you get this sense that this is a developed, peaceful society, with their own way of life. Yeah, that I think is really appealing, and it's based around that they have a cathedral. It's one of the only actually. There's a cathedral in Lindblum as well.
I think there was a cathedral in Burmecia as well.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of religious iconography, if not religion itself.
But, and when you find Ico, they talk about praying for a solid minute.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that angle on this game. But
there's one thing I want to say about Cleyra before we get into the nitty-gritty. I think this is the environment when I decided that I fucking hate Quina and I want to set Quina on fire and remove he, she, as they say, from my party forever. Because...
Yeah, the game kind of knows that you hate Quina. The game will come back to that.
Quina literally ruins every single emotional scene with, where's the food? Every single time.
She has such a great combat ability, though, is the problem.
Eat.
Yeah.
Like, eat. It's such a cool, like, she gets to eat the enemies and gain their powers. It's such a cool ability.
It's such a pain in the ass to do because you don't know which enemies have abilities and which ones you don't.
Yeah.
You can't eat people. They never have abilities.
Yeah, I know. But then even... it's just a pain in the ass. I wish it were kind of like enemy skill from Final Fantasy VII. If you get hit by the ability, you would absorb it rather than I have to eat the person that has the ability in order to get it. Yes, it ties into Quina's character a lot more, but it's kind of a pain.
Yeah, I like the eat from Final Fantasy VIII just because it says pardon the interruption.
Yeah,
but it pardon the interruption, so you don't have to see them do it, and then when it comes back, the enemy is gone, and you've gained some life or something.
Yeah. The one reason why I would say Quina is because when you go to check out on Quina, Quina chases after some of these people saying, "Where's your food?" And it's like, dude, that's kind of creepy. And then you find Quina staring into a whirlpool of sand.
Yep.
And you chase after Quina, and then you realize you're back at the bottom of the trunk of the tree, and you have to climb all the way back.
Yeah. Quina's got some... And then I think Quina tries to eat a mushroom. Quina is a comic relief character through and through. Pretty much.
But there's already so much comedy in this, in the more saccharine segments of the game. I don't think you needed a pure comic relief character. I think you could have goofy characters that have their moments where they're able to pontificate on the darker elements of the game. You didn't need a pure comic relief character. I think there's plenty of comic relief here.
I agree. I think that Quina is a wasted opportunity because
the idea of having a chef in your team is cool.
Yeah. The combat ramifications are pretty strong. Unfortunately, the character is paper thin.
There's not much of a story to her either. I mean, I can't think of like what her motivations are beyond, cuisine.
Go out, see the world, eat stuff. It's a very simple motivation.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I mean,
there have been dumber ones in the history of RPGs.
Yeah. At the beginning of the game, if you let it play, kind of every character has their own single sentence description of what their dilemma is.
And just eat.
Quina's is indulgence, and then it says, I do what I want. Why you care or something.
Ugh.
Yeah, so Quina is not the most well-developed character, but she plays, I think, a pretty important role in the gameplay part of it. It's an interesting part. Not important, interesting. It's a pretty distinct character. Quinn is
it is. It's a different combat mechanic, from the rest of them.
It's of the 2 or 3 characters that I think are the most interesting combat-wise, Quinn is probably up there.
Yeah, you're right. That's true.
So then, Cleyra, you have that dance.
You have the dance.
And then shit pops off.
The shit hits the fan, basically.
And my girl comes back.
Beatrix snatches up a gem.
Mm-hmm.
They get invaded, and you have to guide... So Alexandrians invade Cleyra, and you have to guide the survivors of Cleyra to the cathedral to try and save them. Did you guys succeed at saving everyone?
I didn't, because I feel as if the game having these 50-50 kind of situations is kind of BS, because they didn't really provide me with a good idea of where I should have sent the characters to. It would have been nice if you saw characters run to a safe place and it's I have to ferret the characters to that location and then they'll be safe. Otherwise, it was I don't know. Go up. Oh, nope, you're dead.
So
Shit.
The way you figure it out is the first characters you meet, it's send them down the trunk or send them up into the town. And if you get them right, you're supposed to send them up because obviously, you were fighting people all the way up the trunk. Sending them down the trunk is a bad scene. So if you send them the right direction, they will always go the right direction from then on. And for the other characters, if you don't have that guide to kind of tell you which way to go, you almost always want to send them... 1, never send them back the way they came. And 2, never send them back to a location that you've already been. And so if you know kind of the layout of Cleyra from having explored, that's how you can kind of suss it out. But I agree that it's a real bummer when you lose someone, and I think that it's, to the game's credit, that when you lose someone, you lose them. Like, they don't make it. You see them get killed, and if you don't screw up, they will be there in the cathedral at the end.
Yeah. Here's a weird kind of, like, maybe a little quibble. It's only a minor contrivance, but I liked how when we were in Burmecia, you see dead bodies, and I disliked how in Cleyra the bodies disappear and there's no real kind of sense of the costs of war. It would have been better, or I think more impactful, if there were actual bodies as this war is breaking out in this idyllic state. And I just, it was a weird thing that I noticed.
Do you think that the difference was there would have been too many civilians? Because the other time, weren't all the bodies soldiers?
No, there were women and children. No children, just there were men
civilians?
And
women. Okay. Yeah. I'm recalling incorrectly then.
Yeah, I just when you spend this time learning about Fire Marshal Dan and his kids and his family. He's like, you saved my life before, and then his body disappears. I felt like that scene would have been far more impactful if I saw his body and was like, fuck.
Yeah, and maybe that's because it's T for teen. Like, these characters who you've talked to and who you know fucking dying in front of you might have been too far.
They already had dead bodies, so...
But never anyone you knew.
Yeah, you're right. It's like, Fire Marshal Dan ain't going to be able to pay his kids tuition anymore. They're going to have to go to community colleges for 3 years before they're going to be able to transfer their credits.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be working on the pole, or like... You don't know what they're going to go through anymore.
Exactly. And I like that the second to last spot before you make your final stand at the cathedral, that there's just two of the Wind Maidens who are just hanging out in this kind of alcove saying, and they're like, what the heck are you doing? You need to get somewhere safe. And they're like, this is where we always go when we're worried. So even though something's happening, this is where we wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like, I think they play up the attack on Cleyra really well.
Yeah, and then you're right. There's a build-up that something bad is going to happen to this entire settlement, and then there's a payoff to that build-up. But there's one thing, and we talked about how there was kind of weird, awkward stuff that I think is problematic. I think that... and I know you guys are going to probably hate this, I think that Beatrice is a war criminal, and the fact that she later tries to become a member of your party is very much off-putting. She's the one who orders a lot of this destruction. Certainly she's taking orders from the Queen, and you could say she's following orders, but that's not an excuse. Beatrice is essentially responsible, or at least in part, for all of this destruction, and then we kind of yada, yada, yada it away, and then welcome her with open arms to our party. And the fact that she plays a role later in the story kind of whitewashes or just washes away the fact that she commits this terrible act of genocide.
I think that you're right. There is this tension between what she has to do, what she does in the beginning of the game as a villain, and then when she has her turn. I think from a gameplay perspective, because they have you fight her multiple times and show you exactly how rough and tumble she's supposed to be, that moment when she joins your party is supposed to be this empowering moment. Like, nothing can stop you when you have her on your side. But I don't know that they give her enough turmoil about what she's done for me to feel 100% comfortable. Though I think the game makes you understand that she is 100% for her country. She is as unquestioningly loyal as Steiner, and maybe more so. And she's made clear in her fight with you the first time that she has killed hundreds of men and never lost. So however many... she has gone through this sort of stuff for years and years and years. That much is clear. So you don't really necessarily know what the hell she was up to before this. So she might be even worse, or she might be a hero, and this could be a complete divergence. We don't really ever get to know.
And the sort of decisiveness of her turn, if you wanted to be a charitable sort of, if you wanted to be charitable about the whole thing, the decisiveness of her turn could be seen as sort of an aspect of character. Like, listen, she carried out these sort of atrocities, which, I'm willing to accept those are atrocities. She carried out those atrocities with the sort of decisiveness that once she realized they were perpetrated by this queen for all the wrong reasons, she sort of instantly made that turn.
Yeah, and she said, I've been serving the wrong royal family member. Mm-hmm. Shit. Basically, what have I done?
I don't know. I don't think that, one, that it forgives her character, and the fact that, two, they tried to frame her as a sympathetic character is at least a disconnect in the story, especially when you are trying to build up the idea that Garnet is trying to prevent unnecessary deaths, unnecessary killing by the part of Alexandria, and yet here's this general that basically carried out all of the destruction that we talked about needed to be stopped in the first place.
Do you think you're potentially committing sort of a fallacy of presentism, that you're importing a moral system onto a society that doesn't necessarily abide by it? Like, you think about sort of feudalism and fealty towards a monarch or a feudal lord as the paramount moral virtue of a society. You might be applying standards which just don't really apply.
So let me tell you a little bit about my perspective. I'm half Jewish.
Okay.
This is where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So that's basically my perspective.
Right.
Is I don't accept the idea that she's taking orders and that is an acceptable excuse.
All right. I mean, that's a legitimately fair point. I was just saying, if you look at some sort of Old Norse society, right, in which you perform these sort of, movements of fealty towards a ruler, and then you applied some sort of modern, socio-political, ethical paradigm to it,
you are correct. I would say you are correct, except for the fact that every character recognizes what happens to Cleyra and Bermesia is an atrocity and a war crime.
Okay. All right, that's a good point. That's a good point as well. I might be thinking their moral system is more significantly different than our own than it actually is. It's a good.
That is also a good point.
One distinction for her is that I believe she is convinced. The queen convinces her that the Bermesians were going to bring war. That is her argument for why they attacked them first. And with Cleyra, she immediately protests. So the thing we're getting up to is after she steals the gem, the queen calls in what is essentially a nuke. She calls in a summon. She summons Odin, who rides down on his horse Sleipnir, throws a spear into the tree of Cleyra and nukes it. There's a mushroom cloud, and then he flies away, and everyone who you tried to save is dead. In one of the most overt WMD analogies.
This came from a Japanese developer.
Yeah, this came from Japan.
That's pretty overt.
Just in case. So, she, as soon as you get onto the Red Rose, the Queen's ship, she mentions, why did you even do that? We had taken what we wanted. My soldiers were everywhere. We didn't need to do that. What the heck? I had it under control. And flexing your muscles like that, it seems like she's at least conflicted about the way that the Queen did it. I don't know if, she had her way, they would have just killed everyone with swords and magic instead. I don't know, but I think there's enough ambiguity that if you wanted to argue, the first one she thought was a war, was an act of war, not an act of genocide. And the second one, she thought she was capturing a city. And the Queen said, no, we're going to destroy the city. But I think that even that is probably charitable to Beatrix.
But you're right. Cleyra is not going to be a location that we will ever be able to revisit ever again.
No, it's a small... If you try to revisit it, it's a smoldering crater. I tried to.
It's a smoldering crater. It's actually great that they did that. And it's a shame because I actually kind of like the idyllic state, as well as I liked interacting with the people.
Yes, Cleyra's a great town. I think that of the towns in Disc 1 and 2, it's one of my favorites, actually. There's one we'll get to later that's my actual favorite.
I know what you're talking about. I feel conflicted because, I brought up the Beatrice stuff, but then also I do feel like, even though it's very overt, the fact that it has this commentary about weapons of mass destruction, it's respectable that they tried in some way to have, like, if you take war to the total war perspective, these are the costs, and it's very clear that the costs are not worth what they are getting out of this in terms of Alexandria. The one criticism I would say is the fact that you really don't understand why the Queen is going on this quest of world domination or continental domination makes it so as that she's just being evil for the sake of being evil.
Yes, and that's where she is for most of Disc 2.
And I feel like that is a miscalculation in the stories, on the responsibility of the story.
Yeah, if it were indicative of some sort of, like, at the very least, rampant paranoia on her part, like if she at least had sort of some sort of impetus to think like that this strike was coming from her enemies.
Like, what if her husband had been assassinated by someone and she's gone on this quest to try and find out who it is, and she's become paranoid? Really. Yeah, anything to contextualize why she
they
wants...
do at the end of Disc 2.
Yes, she's greedy, but, like, that is... I feel like even then they could have done a far superior job in terms of contextualizing it and giving me a good reason to understand why she was doing this.
As to why this greed erupted in this moment.
Yeah. Like, it's like this game needs pathos, ethos, and logos far more than what the game ends up providing for the audience.
At least this far. So, sorry.
Gino!
So, I'm sorry.
You're kicking this can down the road again, Gino.
You said Disc 2 was going to get better about not kicking the can down the hallway.
I think it did.
It improved on Disc 1, but in the country of the blind, Gino.
Well, after this section, you save Garnet from they're going to execute her because the Queen is mad with power. Then the party, you fight Beatrix one more time, and the party splits up. The knights all go hold the fort, which is awesome.
Can we talk about the first part of the Alexandria Castle being just the worst? Like the mini game where you're swishing back and forth. The fucking fact that the mission is timed and you have no idea where you're going. That's such an annoyance.
Yeah. It's not great. But you do get a sweet sword for Steiner, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, swords are always cool.
Yeah. It's just...
You get to kick the shit out of those two fucking jesters you hate so much.
So, yeah.
Why won't they be more serious?
Gino, so I accidentally went down some...
so comical.
I went down some pathway, and I fought against this weird monster, and I think I don't... Was I crazy? I think I fought, like, Tantalus or Tantarian? I don't know.
Yes, that thing's fucked up. You don't want to fight that
yet. I was like, hey, is this the boss I'm supposed to fight? And then it kicked my ass, and it's like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to do that again. That's clearly not the right spot.
That's an optional boss. You can fight that. There are two opportunities to fight that thing. You can fight that here, and then there's another moment later in the game you can fight it. It has a really nice item you can steal. But other than that, not much going on. Oh, no. I think you kill it, and then you get a good item.
But no. Goddamn time missions. There's so many goddamn... I don't like time missions. And the fact that the Zorn and Thorn mission is also timed... And then you're also...
no random battles.
There's no random battles, but you're still... You're in this battle. And I got close because I wanted to steal all the shit from Zorn and Thorn. I wanted to get that mad Stardust rod. Maybe you can respect that.
You gotta get that dust. Yeah, it probably won't make you feel better to know that, like, I think the next shop you can buy the things that you steal from Zorn and Thorn.
I did notice that, and then I proceeded to, like, say, you know what, I'm done for today. Okay. So, here's something that I don't understand. So, Brawny, I'm going to just keep calling him Brawny, wants to pull out the summons that Garnet was born with. They're inside of her. So she has to... she has to get Zorn and Thorn to perform an exorcism.
Basically.
To pull out the summons from her body.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And the name for the summons is called Idillion?
Eidolons.
E-dildos?
Eidolon?
E-lions? E-dildos? Electronic dildos? What are they called?
Eidolons.
Eidolons.
Yes.
So the Eidolons are summons.
Yes.
But so you have an agreement with some sort of god that they get to be inside you for the rest of your life.
You can call them. You can call on them. Basically.
Or are they like, okay. So basically, they were able to pull out Bahamut from Garnet. Is that how she got Bahamut?
They pulled the ability to summon Bahamut out of her. Yes.
That's Dragon Guy?
Yeah, the dragon guy that blew everything up and shit got fucked. I don't know.
There's some lore stuff when we get to Maiden Sorry that we can talk about this.
Yeah.
So you
fought Beatrice
her.
again.
Yeah, you fight her.
Again, I feel like the first couple of times the battle with Beatrice was fine, but the fact that we have to do it a third time.
But then you team up. You have a squad. You have all the knights, and they're holding like these attacking forces. They're holding them back.
Yeah.
And then you get a Lewis Carroll reference.
Which one?
Bandersnatch.
Yeah,
the
Bandersnatch. Dog.
Okay. Yep. The Bandersnatches, and then you escape. You get to Pinnacle Rocks, which that area sucks. You can get Garnet.
Before that, there was another weird snake monster. It's like...
It's that same one.
How are there goddamn so many snake monsters in these goddamn trenches? And Pinnacle Rock, it's filler. There's no other way to describe it. Pinnacle Rock is filler.
So, one interesting... the one interesting thing about Pinnacle Rock, I hate that whole section, but...
Filler.
That story that you're putting together to tell Ramuth...
Yeah.
To convince him to join you.
That like
is
Final
actually,
Fantasy 2?
Yeah, that's you retelling a moment from Final Fantasy 2.
Wait, I actually got that right?
Yeah.
Didn't get it either.
No, there's just a character who he joins your party, and then I think he sacrifices himself.
Sure.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Final Fantasy 2 is widely regarded as also one of the worst Final Fantasy. Yeah, one of the worst Final Fantasy games.
Yeah. So it.
Did you have to?
What that's
was
for.
there? I ended up picking human, but can you pick hero as well? Is there? Basically,
Yes.
It has to be beginning, middle, like silence. But basically, the ending can be human or hero, right? Because I got paranoid, and I didn't know if I had to pick one or the other.
You can pick either one, and he will buy it. But he basically said, like, whichever one you pick, he's like, I understand where you're coming from with that interpretation of this story. Do you really think that's what it is? Well, we'll find out together.
And basically, you never are able to go to that location ever again. And it's like, well, bye-bye, Electric Grandpa. Oh, no, wait, you're a part of Garnet. And then he suggests that he's going to be like a mentor for Garnet, but then you never see him ever again. The Eidolons are a weird thing. So...
Yeah,
they're kind of like Naruto. They're kind of like Naruto. What?
Okay.
In what way?
Like summoning the giant frog, and the frog is actually its own human being. It's its own person, and they actually have sentience. Yeah, anime.
So Eidolons, I think the game will eventually. It doesn't explain this super well, but the concept is Eidolons are these deities that when people believe in them, they come into existence. So they are driven. They are legends made real.
That's a weirdly Shin Megami Tensei idea.
Yeah, and so summoners are people who can then call on these legendary creatures and bring them into this world. And that stuff will come up again. But Maiden Sorry covers that.
Once you get out of Pinnacle Rock, then honestly, when Pinnacle Rock ended, I think that's when I started to actually like this game.
Yes.
No.
I thought that Cleyra or Lindblum were kind of the moments for me personally. You didn't, Pete? No?
I didn't like that little girl.
You didn't like Eiko?
Oh, I'm totally with you, man. I hated Eiko, but I do like the scene where basically Lindblum gets fucked. And you have to go through Lindblum, and it's just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the moment where, those are people you knew, and you see them get sucked up into the sky, into this giant maw of madness.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, actually.
Like, the way that it happened, like, you just see this gigantic vacuum-mouthed creature that is as big as the city that was the biggest thing you had ever seen, and just, like, the glass shatters, and it vacuums out soldiers and people and furniture, and then they all just, like, it vanishes, and then they all fall to the ground.
That was pretty wild.
Like, it was never there. And when you start walking around Lindblum, I don't know if you guys saw, there's a crowd surrounding a black mage.
I did see that. And then they want to kill it, and then Zidane tries to convince them, no, he's technically a human being, leave him alone. And they're like, no.
Yeah,
this was the first time where I did feel motivated to interact with every possible NPC, because I did want to see basically where everyone was. And if you do that, you get some really touching and emotional tidbits of information. Like, there's the grandma who's blind and complains that she'll never get to see her grandson ever again.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff that really hits home the fact that, man, war sucks.
And they're occupied, too. So there's all these soldiers that, like, you have people who are trying to talk, like, be collaborators. There are people who are trying to subvert some of the soldiers. I think if you go to some of the different areas, like, there are people who have fallen in love. Like, the soldiers are dating some of the people. I forget. I don't fully remember. But there's a lot of depth, I think, in Lindblum. And Lindblum is one of the places that throughout the game changes the most.
Yeah.
This is kind of the down moment for Lindblum, obviously. But as someone who, you know, lives in New York and was around for 9/11, like, seeing a depiction in a game of a place that has been hit by what is a huge attack, and seeing how the people are reacting to it, I thought was this was obviously not a reaction in any way. This game predates that event. But it's something that you don't really see attempted with honesty in games, and not played up for kind of that this kind of tragedy would happen, and then you'd walk through and the place would be completely deserted, like Burmecia.
It doesn't feel exploitative, is what I think is very important to point out.
There's a big leap between how Final Fantasy treats it and how something like Gears of War treats it, so much sort of like annihilation, occupation sort of trope.
Yes. And I think that the moment, like that one you called out specifically, ZP, where the woman is blinded.
Yeah. Like that hit me. That was like, oh man.
And if you go to the synthesis shop, the synthesis shop is still open, but the old man who used to be manning the fire is dead. And so his son still runs the shop. And so the fire in the synthesis shop, if you examine it the first time, it says it's too hot, it's burning too hot, and it's supposed to be like the grandfather tells him, like, this is too hot, you're gonna melt the metal, you're doing a bad job. And the next time you go, it says the fires are cold, almost like they're weeping. And then obviously
the little touches. It's the game. I have to give them credit in this location. I do feel like there are the little touches where they went above and beyond what is normal. I mean, they could have what they could have done is just basically have a destroyed city where there are a couple of NPCs that are like, oh no, I won't be able to do some shopping here. Oh no, I used to work here. But they committed to the fact that this is an act of war, that this is devastating, and that
people still have to live there.
People still have to live there. And it's done respectfully, not exploitatively, and it doesn't feel cheap. It feels genuine. Like, they actually tried to do something with no malice or no feelings of cynicism.
Yeah, when people are debating whether they should crush in a Black Mage's chest because it's a monster, and someone's arguing, no, that's a living being, we shouldn't do this, I thought that expression of, I don't know if retribution,
yeah, retributive is a word. It's the adjective.
Retributive rage that they want to feel, because they can't strike back against the Alexandrians, but they can strike back against this seemingly inanimate thing, and it can be the target of their anger, their wholly justified anger. But whether decency and morality says that you are not to take vengeance on this thing just because you're upset, because it's alive. They play with some stuff, and I love this section. You leave Lindblum.
It's a damn shame what happens right after you leave Lindblum.
What is right after Lindblum?
You go to Q's Marsh, and then you have to deal with Quina. And Quina's trying to chase after frogs.
Yep.
And then you go to Fossil Rue, which is some hot bullshit.
Yep. Fossil Rue is there's some digging, and there's like an extended...
some of the worst fucking puzzles in the entire goddamn game.
Yep.
How many times did you fight the giant chariot purple monster?
I like that part.
I fought it no times.
I fought it 6 times. I counted.
That's too many times.
What happened was I would try to get as close as possible to the swinging axes, but then I would get too close, and then it would basically bump me back and back and back, and then I would immediately run into the dude.
Yeah.
So I fought him 6 times.
I think it's right, left, right is what you need to do. If you stick to that side, you'll pass all the pendulums.
Yeah, you're right, but, you know... And then, we forgot to mention it when it was first introduced, but mercenaries are chasing after you.
Yeah.
There's a lady with an axe. She wants to chop your balls off or something. She wants Garnet's necklace, which is why, and I thought this was a nice touch, which is why her priority is to kill Garnet first, which you can actually take advantage of in combat. You just perpetually have Garnet heal herself and basically don't have to worry about it. And then that made stealing her shit way easier.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Fossil Roost sucks.
It's one of my least favorite sections. I'm so glad.
Navigating the caverns with those Gargans was just a giant pain in the ass.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I can turn off random battles now and fast forward through that section, just because it's long. Like, there are good items to be found there, but that's not enough of a reason for me to run around this fucking place.
I have to freaking go do so much backtracking. And to be honest, we had our discussion about bad puzzles in these games, but it's another puzzle that I really do feel like the best course of action is to just brute force it, touch everything, switch everything, and see if that gets to the end.
Yep.
There's nothing to parse out, really. It's
flip the switch and then go to the point where the switch sends you and then find out if that was the right way. And if it's a dead end, you get an item, and it wasn't the right way. So you get out of that section, then you go to Condipeti, the
Condottiere,
home of the dwarves. The dwarves say "Rally Ho." That is also a callback.
Section.
Oh, it was. This is one of those scenes to where I liked it initially because it was so dumb. It's like, okay, I get it. We want to have this comical set piece. And then there's something that happens here that fucking completely ruins the entire scene for me.
So is this before or after the Black Mage Village, the thing that ruins it for you?
It would be the wedding.
Okay, so that's after. So let's go to the Black Mage Village first. So Condipeti, you get there are some dwarves. They're like, oh, you are a pointy hat, Vivi. Where are all the other pointy hats? And then...
How long does it take you to understand what they're saying? Because it took me, I would have to talk to the same person 2 or 3 times before I would understand what they're saying. I don't like how they've been translated. I understand they're trying to go for like a Scottish or Cockney accent, but...
Well, it annoys me that they deployed, a dialect for humor.
Yes.
Which,
almost,
is annoying. As if, standard English is so great all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, they've been deploying a dialect for class definition the whole time with Steiner and Garnet, speaking with almost no contractions and higher vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a good point as well. I guess I just didn't pick up on that one because it's much less overt, whereas this one's a dialect associated with a specific
region.
Yeah, cultural group.
And Ruby speaks in Southern twang for some reason.
She does. Well, she's a cow.
But she's the only one that speaks that.
Person.
That's my problem with some of these things is the fact that a race gets its own dialect and it's played for laughs to depict this race, this culture as country bumpkins. It's kind of offensive.
Kind of.
Nah, you're right. I shouldn't say kind of. It is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't love Condi Petty. It's fun. Like, it's got some comedic moments that I think are kind of funny. You find some good items there. It's really forgettable. The part that matters to me is when you go to the Black Mage Village.
Yeah, when you see that first mage and Vivi has this moment where he feels motivated to chase after that Black Mage
and you realize that there are other people like him. So you go to the Black Mage Village. It's getting in there kind of sucks because you have to go where there are no owls and that you run into battles. That I think is a clever puzzle. But
the owls signify how close you are or how far away you are.
Yeah.
There's still random encounters when you're in that forest, right?
Yep, you fight owls.
Yeah.
Fucked up owls that have telepathy.
So, I liked the Black Mage Village. It's one of the more touching moments in the story. I think that it's one of the few moments in Disc 2 where I think they had a target and they hit that target spectacularly, or at least for the most part.
Yeah, so
it could have been. I don't like the music that plays at the Black Mage Village because there will be some deep, heavy shit that Vivi's going through, and then it transitions immediately back to that synth pop that plays in the Black Mage Village, and it's like this cognitive dissonance that is really tough to swallow.
I think the Black Mage Village music is a callback to an earlier song from another game, but I'm not 100%
too
sure.
Upbeat for what you discuss and what you learn about in terms of these people. This is the one location that should have had like a downbeat melody. And then the other big thing that I have a problem with the Black Mage Village is this is another village where I feel like there are too many ATEs. Especially, don't give Quina an ATE in the Black Mage Village. Fuck that. No. Don't give Quina an ATE.
Quina wants to find out how chocobos taste, Pete.
Yeah, I know. And I can, I've supported Quina from the beginning, and I support her in that. If she wants to eat a chocobo, fuck it. She can eat a Moogle if she wants to. I don't care.
If you get its health low enough, she will.
I just... No. Don't have Quina have an ATE during the sequence. Because her ATEs are played for yucks and comedy, and Garnet's...
all the other ones.
And Garnet's are just cringy shit of her trying to interact with a culture that she doesn't know how to talk to because she's hoity-toity. Just have it be about Vivi. Just have it be Vivi's character moment. Pure and simple.
When they do that, I think it's some of the strongest stuff in the whole game.
Agreed.
Pete, why don't you go? Do you have any thoughts on this section? Because I'm going to speak for a bit.
On the Black Mage section, my only sort of issue with the Black Mage section is that they position... I don't want to phrase this. They position them as sort of a simpler tribe that lives deep in the forest with sort of no real knowledge of death. And in their simplicity, they reveal to Vivi a greater truth about his life and existence. And I don't really... Yeah, I find that a little unsavory, that they're sort of looking like, look at this backward tribe in the forest. Who
the
somehow
noble savage?
Who somehow knows... I didn't want to go that far with it because I don't think it's that egregious. But it's borderline, where it's like, look at how they know more about some of these truths of life, even in their backward ways.
Even though they're just now coming to terms with the fact that they're golems. Like, how did you read a Nietzschean book? Or, how did you even find the pieces to build the scaffold?
Their thing is, I don't know that they necessarily have a culture or a society so much as they are all people who snapped into existence out of nowhere, had no one to teach them, and they just had to learn on their own. Yeah. Like, they're all children. They're basically an entire city manned almost... Like, there are one or two black... I think there's just, like, one black mage who seems to know what the fuck's up. Everyone else seems to be some variation on a child who's been placed into a... They've been placed into, like, shopkeeper role, and they're like, what do I do as a shopkeeper? Oh, I guess I take money and then I give you items.
Yeah, but
I guess that's what it is.
It assumes a little bit more cultural significance when, like, Vivi says something like, when do they stop moving? And he's like, thank you for using our words, Vivi. But you know what it truly means.
And I think that one character, the one with the staff, Mr.
Yeah, he's obviously the head honcho, whoever he is.
He's the head honcho. He knows what the hell's up. And when he says using our words, I think it's just that most of the other black mages just don't know what that means. It's not necessarily that it's their culture so much as everyone else is ignorant of the facts of life and death, because they don't know when they were born and they don't know what death means. At least that was my understanding. I still find
it unsavory. I see where you're coming from, and I see the legitimacy of the argument you're making, but I don't think I'm going to get over the unsavoriness.
So wait, are you saying that overall your impression was negative of the Black Mage Village, or that was just one minor thing that disturbed you?
No, by no means. I think overall it's an effective piece. I think it really gets us sort of where Vivi's struggles are going to head future in the game. I do have another sort of slight interpretive problem that I think I think Gino's going to make an interpretation here, and I think it's a heavy interpretation to put on one of those QTEs, if I remember it correctly. But that's an interpretive issue that, I can't really quibble with too much.
Which ATE do you mean?
The one where the grave scene. The grave scene's a QTE for the most part. Yeah.
Yes. So there's two things here in the Black Mage Village. One, there's a story that Zidane tells Garnet about his childhood that I think is really it was really impactful for me.
Yeah, I have a problem with that scene. With that scene. Story.
That all he remembers of his childhood is a color.
I'm a sucker for father-son stories, too.
What was it? ZP, what's your problem with that scene?
My problem with that scene is that he depicts a level of humanity that the game never reinforces later in the story, and he goes back to being his Casanova wannabe of sexually harassing Garnet almost immediately after that scene. And then that is also something that happens immediately before that scene. So it's almost as if it's schizophrenic in terms of his characterization.
Well, I think that it's a public-private distinction. When he's having that moment with Garnet, they are alone, basically in bunk beds, kind of having the kind of conversation like when I had, when I still had sleepovers. That was the kind of thing that...
Now you just have a different kind of sleepovers.
Yeah. But... that's the kind of conversation that you could be like up late into the night talking to someone about that you might not express if you were in mixed company or in a different circumstance. And I think that was the kind of storytelling they were trying to invoke, that they are kind of alone in this room trying to keep each other company.
There are also times when Zidane is alone with Garnet and he's just the worst.
I think just part of the key though too, I think in the sort of atmosphere Gino's invoking, the bunk beds become particularly significant here, in that Zidane doesn't necessarily have to look at Garnet as he relays this story.
Okay,
and it's this nighttime before bed sort of situation.
There's a word for it. I forget it, but this particular atmosphere makes this kind of story more prevalent than when they are on an adventure and alone together, or in the field and alone together. Like, or even like before the Festival of the Hunt, and he's kind of trying to show off this bravado, trying to get a date. Like, in this moment, they are already friends. He doesn't need to be that person right this second.
Yeah.
And he has no one to act for other than her. And so it's kind of a moment of vulnerability that... It's also when you learn that his Baku beat the shit out of him.
Yeah.
Like, as if he needed more of a demonstration. Like, Baku's not a... He clearly
Is
like,
not a good father.
No.
No.
Like, he was brought up in a messed up situation. Like, on top of not knowing where he comes from, which is a pretty... Final Fantasy games tend to play around with amnesia a whole hell of a lot. Like, FF8 and 7 are both reinforced on the backbone of amnesia as a plot device. Yes.
That's FF8.
That's FF8. It is amnesia as backbone. 9, I don't know if it's amnesia so much as Zidane just not knowing where he came from. Like, his earliest memories are...
3 different characters don't know where they came from, it turns out.
In which game? This one? 9?
This one, yeah. Zidane, Garnet, Vivi.
Yes. Adopted, created in a lab, and then we don't know yet for Zidane. So I like that story where he just says, like, there was a man who didn't know where he came from. And I think starting his story that way is pretty interesting. It kind of reframes him as a person. And basically he wandered the world trying to find his home, couldn't find it, went back to the thief who kind of brought him up. And then at that same moment, Vivi is learning that his race is incredibly mortal.
Yes.
That he probably has a year to live, and that's generous. And he's already lived for however long. Because I guess Black Mages just die naturally within a year of their production. And everyone other than him and this one other Black Mage they're somewhat ignorant of that fact. And when they become... Yeah, most of them are ignorant of that fact. They don't understand what death means. So you see one of the Black Mages kind of saying, one of my friends stopped moving, and this other person who knew a lot of things told me we needed to bury him. I, wait for him to get up. I check to see if he's gotten up every day, and maybe I'll wash him off when he gets back up.
Yeah.
We'll hang out together. And it's this really sad, heartbreaking moment. And if you haven't... So, ZP, I told you not to read the article I wrote for GiantBomb.com. I speak pretty at length about this scene. The thesis of that article is interpreting Vivi's character arc as one of terminal illness. And he's a character who is basically told midway through this game that he has X amount of time to live, and after that time, there's nothing he can do about it. He's going to die. And I think framing, when you look at it that way, it kind of gives an added level, for me personally, of the gravitas of the scene, even though, there's an existential dread here that I think anyone can appreciate.
Okay.
But for me, this is one of the most significant scenes.
I would agree.
In this whole
significant.
Series.
Does it change the inflection of the scene insofar as it's not really a terminal illness? It's just his lifespan. Like, I think for the most part, it assumes the same sort of gravitas, just the fact that his lifespan is so short. But I'm not sure if it carries the same sort of tragedy when it's just sort of the natural, quote unquote, natural outcome of your life, as opposed to an illness.
Well, the thing that, for me, one, he does not know that is the trajectory of his life until this moment.
Right.
So he was living his life under the assumption that he was just like everyone else. He was an ordinary human, or not a human, but, an ordinary being who would live an ordinary lifespan. That was his modus operandi. And then all of a sudden you find out that not only are you you're like a different type of creature than everyone else, but you are super short-lived, and you're going to die very soon, and you're not going to get to see half of the things you thought you would. I think that if he was born knowing he was going to only live a year, or he learned it very early on, and, you kind of had the sense, like in Mass Effect, there's a race of people, the Solarians.
Solarians, yeah.
Right.
They have like a high metabolism. They burn fat. They burn hot. So they learn things very quickly. They live a full life in their shortened lifespans. And it's to make you feel that, yes, even though they die young, they experienced all of adulthood. They experienced the fullness of life. And so it is not to be mourned. Their lot as short-lived is not to be mourned. For him, it's pretty strongly implied that his life is getting cut short.
Right, but the point is it's being cut short from a perspective of beings whose lifespans are significantly longer. So even a judgment like it's cut short or he's not living a full life can't be made within our context. They have to be made within the context of Vivi's being, Vivi's species, let's say.
Sure, but I think that the distinction I'm making here is that for him, he was never under the impression there's not this culture that's built up that says this is what our lives look like.
Yeah.
There's never this understanding that this is what you need to know when you are a black mage. All of his frameworks are against people who have normal lifespans.
Okay.
And so he has always lived under the assumption that he had one. And learning it at this moment, I think, makes the metaphor work. Where it plays with terminal illness.
I mean, at any rate, I'm trying to make a fairly sort of philosophical, pedantic counter-argument in the first place. I think you're totally right. It's the abruptness of that shock, that sort of presentation of his lifespan that's changing things. I just wanted to raise the question of within what context should we evaluate, quote-unquote, the fullness of Vivi's life.
Yes, and I think that's a question that the game's going to be asking for basically the rest of its duration. But
the one thing I would say... no, go ahead. Thing? Yeah, no.
I love the cinematography of this sequence.
Sure.
The giant blood moon that is kind of over the town, that is over the Black Mage Village.
Creates a sense of dread, yeah.
And also like a sense of majesty, that there's all of these, all of the different... the village itself, like they have pointy-hatted buildings with smiley faces and stuff on it. There's kind of a childlike wonder at night that comes out of this village that it feels like another world almost. And I thought that, there's only a couple of times in the game where they use backgrounds that aren't used, for regular gameplay, and this is one of them, and I think that it was effective. Go ahead, CP.
It's almost like the game had this beautiful moment, and then they didn't know what to follow it up with, so the game follows it up with complete bullshit for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, then you get then he gets hitched. Then he gets to live the next part.
Scene is bad.
Let's just skip that whole. Can we just skip until the tree?
Scene is bad.
And things get interesting again.
No, we have to talk about this. The marriage scene is a bad thing, and whoever put it in is a bad person. You're 16 years old and you're getting married, and then you rope-a-dope Vivi and Quina into getting married. And then the real reason why I wanted to talk about this is that it introduces what I think is now the most insufferable character in the game, Aiko.
Yeah, but before since we are talking about this now, it is another sort of moment of sort of cultural dismissiveness. Like, we don't really have to pay attention to this because it's just like their wedding ceremony. It's not real. It's not serious.
Yeah, there's that. And then there's also how Zidane talks to Garnet for the next hour, where he treats her out as my hubby or my wife. And it's almost as if he's like treating her like an object or a commodity. And it's bad. It's so bad. And I don't know. And there are times when Zidane depicts humanity, and then there are times in which Zidane needs to be punched in the face.
Yep.
And they're not getting better. His moments... What's egregious is the fact that he will show that humanity and then immediately crack a joke about, like, if you need a lap to cry on, I'm always here. It's like, what the fuck? That scene was the worst, because there's actually...
Yep.
So, the wedding scene is bad.
Yep. And I love that the justification is like, I need one more wedding to get at 100. I really want to make that quota. So, whatever, fuck it. You say you want to get married? Whatever.
Sure, I'm on.
Got to get those digits.
And then, you can rope-a-dope Vivi and Quina into getting married, and
that's the best.
That's the best.
What I feel.
Aiko.
She
sucks.
She's a child.
She's a 6-year-old.
Yep.
Yeah. I think we can.
She is a 6-year-old.
Pass that super quick.
She behaves like a 6-year-old. She talks like a 6-year-old. She was raised by Mughals, essentially, so that explains a lot.
Yep. She was raised by her grandpa, and then her grandpa died.
I don't like Aiko. Like, Aiko is a better in-combat character than Garnet, but as a character, I don't like Aiko.
So, the thing that I want to mention with Maiden Saori, and something that I've noticed the times that through replaying this game, is how much the cast are impacted by someone important to them passing away. Aiko is basically raised by Mughals because her family is all gone, and
basically her race is gone as well.
Yeah, but she was raised by her grandfather, and now she's the last survivor because everyone else is gone. Vivi was raised by Quan until he passed away, and Vivi was forced to raise himself. Zidane, he doesn't know what the hell happened to his family. Garnet, we learn, was adopted because her parents passed away, and she was found by someone else. And there's this repeating thing. Freya thought her love was gone. Yeah. Freya thought her love was gone, and it turned out he has amnesia. But the beginning premise is that the person who she cares about the most is gone. And there's a lot of loss, I think, in some of these characters, even though, Aiko is played up for comic relief on some of this. But the moments when her earrings get stolen, and she's like, those were the last things I had to remember my grandfather. What the we need to get them back. Those are the moments that I find especially poignant, even when the game is trying to. So even when it's throwing around this comic relief kind of bullshittery, there are moments that I think are incredibly human mixed in there, to a level that FF8 never touches. It never even gets close. 7 gets close here and there. But
7 is even successful here and there.
Yes,
not always, but sometimes.
I think 9, casually, in moments that are otherwise uneventful, brings up stuff.
And you don't even anticipate that they're going to happen. That's what I actually like about 9, is you don't even know when the game's going to throw dark at you. And it's
it throws dark all the time after Disc 1.
Yeah.
And it throws dark in Disc 1 occasionally, but not this dark. So yes, you can say you guys both hate Aiko, right?
Yeah. Aiko's the worst. The whole scene where she's trying to cook and impress Zidane, the fact that Zidane even has this existential crisis. It's man, is this what Garnet sees me doing to her? It's man, I got to tone this shit down, and then he never does. And I get that she's a 6-year-old kid, and 6-year-old kids will form attachments, emotional and personal, whenever they feel like it, but we're going through some dark, heavy shit, and I feel like it's not appropriate to have a 6-year-old character tag along on this journey in any way, shape, or form. And I am not prepared to deal with her bullshit as we go on this journey.
Yeah, and her weird, I need to get Zidane to like me. Her crush on him is weird. And him even humoring it even a little bit is kind of weird.
Yeah. And then again, there are these weird moments where Zidane treats Aiko with a sense of compassion and humanity. And then he immediately goes back to hitting on Garnet in the weirdest, most scumbaggy way. And those juxtapositions are just a kick in the balls sometimes.
Yeah. There is a moment when Zidane and Vivi bond.
Oh, that scene.
That scene's weird. They bond by, I think they pee
pissing into the river. Yeah.
That's a weird scene, but the conversation they have before they piss in the river is pretty, I think, is nice. And then there's the scene where Zidane and Garnet both go on that boat
Yep.
And then
and talk about Ibsen's castle or Ibsen and the journey. Why'd you go on this journey? Because you asked me to, or something.
Yeah.
To that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene's actually okay. It's just
it's very genuine.
The fact that Garnet is affected by what I would call the Tolstoy disease, where whenever she has this neurosis, she basically passes out.
Mm-hmm. And we'll learn more about what that is.
Awesome. It's the Tolstoy disease.
Something like that.
Anachronia disease.
So after the crazy Ico stuff, you then go to the Ifa tree. You fight a bunch of zombies.
Wait, yeah, you're right. Let's not talk about making dinner. No, not worth talking about.
So, go to Ifa tree.
You fight some zombies.
And if you're smart, all of the random encounters at the Ifa tree are super easy to deal with because the giant evil octopus monsters can be killed by applying soft to them, and everything else
become too soft to live.
Yeah, they announced, "I have become too soft to live," and then all of the other dragons and other undead demons can be killed by casting life on them
or using Phoenix Downs on them.
Yes. And you still get full credit. I remember, I forget if it was 7 or 8. I think it might have been 8. If you did this, if you applied a Phoenix Down or used the life, you didn't actually get the full XP.
I don't remember any fights that you don't get the full XP. There's a boss fight that you just don't get experience from in 8, where you can kill them with an item.
Yeah.
Pete, are you going to use "became too soft to live" as like an insult to people you don't like?
That would be a good one. I was trying to think of something for super soft, but I didn't quite get that one done yet.
I like the location. I like the look of the Ifa tree when it's like polluted and green. But ultimately, my problem is they pull this villain straight out of their ass that basically ties a neat bow over the plot.
You talking about Kuja or the tree?
No, Soul Cage.
It's like,
all along, I'm the person behind the mist. I'm gonna be the Deus Ex Machina to address where we had this problem. And it's a massive Deus Ex Machina. He pops out of nowhere. And I don't know
if it's a Deus Ex Machina. I mean,
it doesn't really solve anything.
They tell you that that's where the mist
comes from.
Yeah, but the mist problem, like as a natural phenomenon, it could have been solved at any point fairly easily. Like, the tree's producing this mist. They just happen to give it an unnecessary backstory.
They personified the tree in a weird way.
They anthropomorphized it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So you kill the tree. The mist goes away. Then you go back to Maiden Sorry, and her Eco's earring is gone.
Yeah, the mercenaries show back up.
They steal Eco's stuff.
Then
I didn't realize that Eco had little angel wings on her back until it was pointed out by what's her name.
And a horn.
Yeah, I didn't realize she had the horn either until it's like, I'm a horned human.
Yeah, summoners, that's a Final Fantasy callback. Like, all the summoners in the early games, that is their, like, distinguishing trait. They have a horn. But
the battle with Scarlet Hair sucks.
Yep.
Yeah, that battle
One-on-one.
sucks. He gets to attack you 3 times what would take you to attack him or heal, which is what I basically had, 2 times at most. So you get to attack him once, then he dodges around, then he hits you 3 times, then maybe you have the opportunity to heal, and then he hits you once, and then he hits you 3 times immediately after that.
Yeah, it's a hard fight, and speedrun it.
This leads to a problem that I know I briefly talked about with you, Gino. I don't like the combat system in Final Fantasy IX. And moments like these, even when you have one-on-one, highlight how long and slow the combat in this game is, because even though it's one-on-one, there's a lot of dead time where you're just waiting for your ATB meter to fill up, you're waiting for Scarlet Hair or Armamant to power up his attack and attack you, there's just a bunch of wasted time. And it's slow. And it doesn't go at a quick enough pace because the mechanics don't allow the game to go at a quick enough pace.
That's one of the main problems with... That was, I think, one of the main criticisms with 9 was that it is a very slowly paced... It has very slowly paced combat. I agree on most all charges there. I think that the fast forward feature and the encounter none feature are a saving grace for the PC version. So if you can play this game on the PC, do so, because that I think solves the Achilles heel of this game in terms of combat. Just picking up the pace, because the actual minute to minute, like when you actually have actions to be performed, I think that it's a deep system. It's just the bars take too long. Period.
Yeah, the bars take too long. And again, it is more nakedly transparent that the bars take forever to load when it's just a one-on-one fight.
Yeah, and thankfully the animations are nowhere near as egregious as 7 or 8. They figured that shit out. Like, you can't even summon until midway through Disc 2. And even that, the summons, the first time you summon them, you get the full summon animation, but every time after that, or most of the times after that, you will get a shortened animation that just doesn't attack.
But Knights of the Round, dude.
No Knights of the Round. So you get Armorant. He joins your party.
Yep.
He is your traditional rogue with the heart.
With a heart of gold. Yeah. I don't... I don't know. He seems fine. I bet he has a character moment in Disc 3 or 4. It's weird that they introduced 2 characters on Disc 2. And then one of those characters is super late.
And one of them is right, like, moments before Disc 3.
Yeah. It's almost like maybe they should have sped things up and cut out a couple scenes here and there and put this up in front. But whatever. I'm just happy that Amarant is not Ico. And
his strongest characteristic is not Ico.
That's a pretty strong characteristic.
It's a strong characteristic, dude. I mean, he's got grit, and he doesn't tolerate nobody's bullshit. I like how even though he very clearly gets defeated by Zidane, he spends like the few moments that he has questioning, how the fuck did this kid beat me?
Yeah, basically. He doesn't get it. This fucking idiot. I love that his solution to how the hell are we going to climb this tree when you go back to the Ifa tree.
Shut up, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you.
He picks up Ico with one hand, picks up Vivi with the other hand, and then just climbs the tree.
Yeah.
I think he's probably, from a gameplay perspective, my favorite character. It's him and Quina. He's a weird... So all of the characters in FF9 are callbacks to earlier Final Fantasy archetypes. He is a weird hodgepodge. Him and Freya are both weird hodgepodges. But he is a mixture of a monk, a samurai, and a ninja. So he has the throw ability that ninjas tend to have. He has throw gil, throw money, which is a move that samurai have from Final Fantasy V. He has chakra, which is a move that monks usually have. He fights with gloves. But his moves, he plays this weird hybrid role where he can heal people. He's one of the only characters that can heal MP. He's got some hard-hitting single attack moves. He's got the ability to like give characters negative status effect, not negative status effects, elemental weaknesses, which is a really weird power. One of his abilities he eventually gets is like the ability he gives someone regen and auto life. So if they die, they come back to life. And he's one of the only characters with a revive. He eventually gets a revive ability. And the reason that I find him so intriguing is that when he trances, his main thing is his moves are all target one, and when he trances, they become target all.
Nice.
Nice.
So he goes from being this loner character, and I think it's a metaphor through gameplay sort of thing, where all of his abilities start out as being things that ostensibly are meant to target himself. And when he's in trance, all of a sudden he becomes the best teammate, basically. He saved me on one of my final boss fight one time because he tranced, and then his ability to cast regen and auto life on everyone, I just cast it, and then I couldn't lose because all my party would come back to life, and he could do that as many times as he wanted. So I think he's a really cool character from a gameplay perspective. Unfortunately, they introduce him so dang late in the game, he kind of doesn't get...
Yeah.
He gets character moments, but it's not the same level of depth that other characters do. And so then we're at the Ifitry. Kuja resurfaces.
Yep.
And he makes a power play. So the queen
wait, that's actually something I got confused about. Did the queen decide I need to kill Kuja, or did Kuja decide to betray the queen and then the queen decides she needs to kill him?
The queen, mad with power, like she's captured everything on the Mist Continent, and she sees that the only person capable of defeating her now is the person who gave her the weapons in the first place.
So Kuja is aware of this.
Yes. He knows that she is so drunk with power that she's going to come for him. So he lures her to this place, intentionally waits for her to summon Bahamut, and then he, through some big eye in the sky, seizes control of Bahamut. He turns on the queen, turns on her whole fleet, and basically annihilates them, and she's killed by her own weapon of mass destruction.
Yep.
And I think that there's this cool moment when Garnet's trying to find she's trying to get a summon, just any summon that can help her mom, and the summon she finds is Leviathan, the sea god, and it can't, like, Kuja's in the air, and she knows that she can't help her mom with this.
She could have cast a tsunami and pushed her mom to the other side of the planet.
Kind of.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like a very good plan either.
No. But I think that that's a cool like trying to contextualize this combat ability within the larger world, because 8 and 7 do a real piss poor job of what the hell is this thing I'm fighting? How are my abilities relative to the world around me? 9 tries to do at least a little bit more contextualization, though.
Yeah, that's pretty.
If Garnet's summons were half as powerful as they are in cutscenes, you should never ever lose a fight.
Yeah, that's the big problem that I have with. They have these summons in these cutscenes, and they look super awesome. And then when you try and use them in combat, they don't do shit.
Yep. So there's the reverse situation where they're more powerful, but And so, what do you guys think of that last sequence?
We traded one villain that we don't understand why they're doing all this bullshit to another villain that we don't know why they're doing all this bullshit. Hooray!
It was a nice sort of power inversion to sort of take something that was previously situated in the hands of, like, the royal family and instead put it in the hands of what's basically a weapons merchant. It's a nice sort of idea that a nice decentralization, let's say, of authority.
Yeah, and I like the moment where you realize that for as long as the queen is the antagonist, like, you think she is the real threat, and this dude was basically playing her the entire time, like a fiddle.
Yeah.
His shitty affectation about, his Shakespearean leanings are a little bit much.
And they're a little cringeworthy.
The blood wipe too. Like, what a trope. Like, oh, you've managed to scratch me.
Yeah.
I like in-game Kuja way more than CGI cutscene version Kuja, because I think CGI cutscene Kuja is a little too over the top in terms of his design.
He's very camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there actually, weirdly enough, they try to explain why he looks the way he looks, which is
really, they explain the thong?
They do.
Okay. I look forward to it.
So
Cisco pops out of the cutscene and starts singing his thong, and so then that explains everything. Everything's better with Cisco.
This game might predate the thong song, doesn't it?
Possibly.
They might have been contemporaries.
Very good. It was a cultural moment.
It was a group cultural moment.
The zeitgeist of the thong.
No, I mean, I think my problem with this scene is that I didn't like Bronny in large part because I didn't feel I could fully understand why she was on this quest for world domination. And I feel equally the same way with Kuja. He's a weapons merchant, so he's motivated by greed.
You're gonna get some stuff.
Okay, great, but I mean, give me some meat on the bone for me to bite into and like get some nutrients for the initial part. Like, what if, you saw Kuja clearly planning a scheme and he was slowly trying to betray the queen rather than, oh, the queen's going to come after me? No problem. I have all my ducks in a row. I could deal with this problem. No issue. Ah ha ha.
Yeah. And they figure out some of this is foreshadowing, and it's the Final Fantasy kind of foreshadowing where, like, they set up a villain and then immediately kill them, and then the new person is 100% the villain. It's not the greatest pacing.
No, I actually think that one of the biggest problems that I have with Final Fantasy IX, and it's a serious problem that I have with 9, is I think it has one of the worst economies of action I've ever seen in a video game. Like, literally, all of this stuff pops off in the very last scene. And looking back at Disc 2, there's a lot of just stupid bullshit where nothing happens for the story. I mean, we didn't have.
There are moments when everything happens,
and I feel like the story that does the story a great disservice because it highlights how poorly paced some of these sequences are. Like Pinnacle Rock, I didn't need that. Fossil Rue, did I really gain anything from that? Did I really need to go to Conde Pide twice?
Well, I think that's trying to answer your problem that you had with the earlier part of Disc 2, that there wasn't a lot of fighting. There wasn't a lot of game to be had. And so
I feel like
still isn't a lot of game.
There's still not a lot of game to have. The game to be had is in the last 5 set pieces.
Well, they break like if you wanted to play more of the combat, they break those. At least those breaks are breaks into dungeons. They're dungeons that you're essentially going through, like Fossil Rue, Pinnacle Rock, the Ifa Tree. Those are all basically dungeons that are supposed to have extended combat sections. It's to break it up between these sections of long cutscenes. So, while I think that this style of design in general is dated, I don't think here's some story, here's some combat, here's some story, here's some combat style of design is really valid anymore. I think that that's what they were going for, and it
sure,
that's what they were trying.
It's a weird beast to tackle. It's a weird situation to try and unravel. And I think back in the day there was probably no easy solution other than to basically cut out half of the game.
Yeah, and it's by virtue of the fact that they have created two completely separate games that happen to exist in one package. Like, there's this combat system with completely different rendering. Like, the way you interact with the game is very different than the moment-to-moment where you're walking around towns. And you have to stitch it together some way. Versus some later games, like even Kingdom Hearts, some action RPGs, where the way you interact with something in the overworld is the same way you interact in combat. It's a weird problem.
Yeah. I don't know.
Go ahead.
I still have issues with the pacing of the game. I think that, again, so much more could have been done with some of these sequences or cutscenes, and I certainly appreciated that things kind of came together and we got that kind of snappy, quick speed with those action set pieces. But I mean, it's all a question of what is it in service of. And if it's in service of, oh, well, we got another fun little moment where we're going to return to Alexandria and it's going to be funny, wacky hijinks over there, then I just have to throw my hands in the air and it's like, fuck. I hope what you have said about how Zidane going to get his shit together and the characters start to realize that there's no turning back now to the naivety of the first disc. I hope you're right. I don't necessarily distrust you, but we've had kind of our initial dark moments. Now it's kind of like we're having our falling action before we hit the denouement. And I just want that to be a smooth slide down. I don't want there to be any bumps. I don't want there to be any crags. I don't want there to be any anything to rub my ass the wrong way, to be perfectly honest.
I'm gonna leave that turn of phrase alone. The thing that strikes me about this last moment is, so when when the queen dies, they try to give her that last moment where she says, when your father died, I was filled with so much grief, and I tried to basically refill that hole with greed. And I think that that's a poor, it's a paper thin justification, but it's yet another example of a character's motivations being drawn from loss and grief.
But this one feels forced and contrived at best. Yeah.
The moment that actually moves me, I think that that's paper thin, but I think that that's more of a justification than
I feel like
Sephiroth ever got.
Was it Vivi that's talking about how I wanted to cry but I couldn't? I feel like that was more morally affecting than the actual watching the queen die.
Yeah, I wanted to hate her but I couldn't, because when Garnet started to cry, I realized that even though she had done so much wrong to me and my people, I couldn't hate her the way I felt I should. And through Garnet, they humanize her mother. They don't humanize her mother, but they make Vivi see her as a human. They make it real for him, I should say. I guess as the player, I never felt like she's now sympathetic in a meaningful way. I could tell that that's what they were going for, but I didn't feel like they justified it enough. But the idea that when you see someone who cares about this person, even if that person is in a lot of ways a monster, it just becomes hard to hate them. Yeah. I think is a subtle play, this subtle middle ground that they're trying to strike. And then when they say, when we left on her escape pod, we took Garnet's mom with us. That's a really, the idea of having this dead body on the boat with them on their way home, and she's a monster. She committed genocide against an entire people. She held a entire city hostage after attacking it with a weapon of mass destruction. She's a monster. And because of that human connection, they couldn't leave her behind. I thought that was a poignant scene. Yeah. Pete, you're looking incredulous.
No, I think it's legitimate, but you can't salvage.
I was about to say that.
You can't salvage hours of no character development with a single poignant moment at the end.
I was about to basically say that. You're erring on the side of trying to contextualize or apologize the fact that this moment happens out of nowhere. It would have been far more powerful if it had been built up or hinted at. The only thing that we get that there was maybe something worth salvaging was the assurances of Garnet that I can save my mom. I can save my mom. And then there's this really good moment where Zidane is all like, "What are you talking about? No, you can't. She's killed millions of people. She's destroyed 2 cities. There's nothing to save."
Yeah, and that's, again, you kind of see the naivete of Garnet, but also, no matter how heinous she is, the queen's still her mom, and so she can't necessarily bring herself to see her the way that literally everyone else sees her. I'm not saying that it's the greatest characterization. It's obviously not, but I think that they're playing with a far more interesting range of emotion than any of the villains in 7 or 8 do. Sephiroth, as a Sephiroth as a person, he finds out who he is, and then it drives him crazy.
I feel that's also incredibly unfair to 7.
Hojo, what do you mean?
I feel by the time they got to 9, they probably knew exactly what they wanted to do. When they were doing 7, they had a lot to do with limited resources and time, and in terms of the fact that there are cutscenes in 7 was a monumental undertaking, and Yeah, you're right. In terms of the writing, this is superior to 7. But I feel like if we put ourselves in the vacuum of when 7 came out, when 8 came out, and then when 9 came out, we have to understand that 7 is of a different era. And I also feel like there are certain things that 7 went after that 9 just straight up never goes after at all.
I just think, so having played some of 6 and 5, or 6 specifically, and 4, those games, I think, try to strike a better ground in terms of humanizing their villains and just a level of writing quality that I don't think 7 or 8 really get to. So I don't think that the writers, the technological switch is enough to justify the different textures of their writing and what they were going after. I think you can definitely say that the translation does 7 no favors. And the translation in 8, like by 9, I think their translators were pretty on point.
No, the fact that some characters make 90s references in this translation is just bad. Why did the characters say bro, Gino?
So some of that stuff is 90s references, but it's better to have 90s references that are at least culturally relevant at the time versus grammatical inaccuracies. Yeah. Like, there were just straight mistakes up and down 7. There are sentences that aren't sentences in that game. That's should never happen in a multi-million-dollar project. So I think that 9 just wanted to play around with emotions that 7 and 8 weren't as interested in. For the most part. Like, you don't have this many segments in this disc where we're talking about existential crises and, mortality and genocide. Like, there are topics that 9 wants to go into and wants to go into explicitly that 7 and 8 only either hint at or pass over entirely. So, like, it's a clear... These are clearly
if they hadn't passed over in 7 and 8, they probably wouldn't have even attempted in 9.
I think so part of the context with 9 that I've mentioned in the past, but let me just reiterate, this was the last game that Hironobu Sakaguchi, the longtime kind of director of the Final Fantasy series, made before leaving Square. So this game was kind of a love letter to all of the earlier games. And so I think that deliberately this game deals with things like mortality and coming to the end of a long run. In that way, as a result of his position when making the game, but I think it's very clear that this game is very interested in those things. Like 8 was supposed to be about love; that was its main theme, was romance. 7, I think, was, I don't know if there was a single governing theme.
I think it was identity and finding yourself.
Yeah, but 9 is really interested in that too. I don't know if it's like...
I think if it's what 7 spent with many of its characters, I think it's identity and finding itself. And I don't know what the fuck 8 was doing. Maybe love. It was
supposed to be romance. It was supposed to be love, but the love story was ridiculous.
Oh, God.
So, let's wrap this up. How are you guys feeling now after Disc 2? Are you more on board? Are you still skeptical? Are you upset with me?
I think I'm more on board story-wise.
Yeah.
But it's just not a very fun game.
No. Okay. So here's what I would say. Final Fantasy IX takes its sweet-ass time to get good. Its characters are inconsistent. There are some really good moments, but god damn do I hate playing this game. Holy shit do I hate playing this game. I'd probably, for the purposes of the next disc, I'm probably just going to bite the bullet and disable random encounters because my inventory system is just a giant mess.
There's a sort.
I know you told me about that. I'll try and see if I can find that because I have to keep scrolling down to the bottom where the P's are to get potions. I have a bunch of duplicate items. I haven't sold any of those cotton robes that you keep telling me if I make a dozen of them, I could make bank. I like the meta narrative of this game, and I'm definitely more on board in terms of the narrative. But I've reached this point in terms of playing this game to where I just want to hit the X button and play the cutscenes and play the story. I think I'm done playing this game, but I want to see this game. Like the mini games, the puzzles, they're exhausting. The random encounters are just whittling away my humanity, what little bits of it are there. And I feel like I've turned into this angry grandpa as I've been writing these blogs. These games have ruined me, Gino.
I'm sorry.
These games have changed me.
Yeah. And 9, I think its combat is one of its biggest... Well, Pete, you go first.
I've pretty much expressed my opinion. I think the story's fine for what it is. I'm not particularly impressed by it, but I just don't think it's a very fun game. And if I'm not enjoying myself playing it, I think it's failed. Honestly.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
sorry, I can't.
9 is
enthusiasm. Gino.
I feel it is. It's right now. Okay, Gino. It's not more than the sum of its parts. It's not less than the sum of its parts. It is exactly the sum of its parts. Because you add in the good story, you subtract in the slow combat. I can see the light in the end of the tunnel. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I felt like even with this second disc, we were still kicking the can, saying, "Don't worry, don't worry. This is going to be something that happens in the disc." Didn't you feel the same way, Pete? There was some can kicking down the hallway that Gino said we weren't going to kick the can anymore.
I mean, yeah, this is a Final Fantasy game. I don't think we're ever going to escape that. There's always going to be some sort of like,
There's always a twist.
Now, yeah. But
there's always
I'm annoyed by it.
What I was kicking the can on was you guys just being like not in on the story and saying the story was bad.
I don't think it's bad anymore. I think that
it's inconsistent.
It's inconsistent, and it's right now it's going in a new direction, and I don't know what that direction is. So I'm concerned. Yes. I am concerned.
And what I
think
I think a lot of the problems you're having right now are problems that are resolved as plot points are resolved. It's like the sort of problems I had when reading like Harry Potter book number 4.
We're 2 discs into this game, though. We're literally halfway done.
It's true, but like in book 4 of like a Harry Potter series, I'm like, these are fucking dangling threads. Why the hell are these all dangling? Why? Yeah, that you resolve this tiny plot point, but where's it all going? And until you get to the end and can see where plot points either didn't pay off or did, it's hard to evaluate.
Okay. I got 26 hours. So you mean to tell me that starting with hour 27, we're going to finally have our awesome clear-cut villain that is the raison d'etre for the characters.
I'm telling you that by the time you finish the game, you will have that. And that's how these games work. I mean, they're trying to tell one gigantic story over the course of like 40 hours. It's like an epic. Like, I don't think at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, you have a satisfactory experience. You have the full experience.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, if you were at the end of Two Towers and you're like, well, fuck, the world's all fucked, the Sauron's still around, what the hell? If you took that as like, this is when we need to evaluate the thing, you probably would.
So I think maybe if there's hesitation in my voice, it's the fact that Disc 2 basically, everything that the game was building up, basically the game has said, all right, fuck that, we're going to go in a completely new direction, you're going to have to believe us, you're going to have to trust us. You're basically going to have to trust the game that it's going to take this pivot and this new direction in something that is worth your time or worth your while. And I'm afraid.
Sure. But in 7, when that was happening, like, they killed off Eris, and then the plot kind of meanders for a bit. And then in 8, it turns out that the main villain was possessed by a future sorceress woman, and turned out to be your adoptive mother, basically. It's like a weird... That game's a nonsense. Like, I think that the fact that you're even asking whether these things will get tied together is more than like the fever dream kind of exasperation you felt at 7 and 8. You're in a better place than you were then. I remember.
Sure, yeah. You're right. I'm in a better place. I don't feel like I've asked nearly as many questions in 9 than
We're
I asked.
discussing this like
7.
it's a work of literature deserving discussion, whereas in 7 and 8, there were times when you're like, what's happening? Who is this?
Yeah. All right.
Why?
You got me. So
we had to have Q&As on what was happening.
For like 30 minutes.
For like 30 minutes of a 3-hour podcast was like, who is this person? What are they doing?
Yeah.
So, without further ado, let's wrap this up. Do you want to make some quick predictions, EP, of what's going to happen? Or do you just
okay, so Kuja is going to be... my prediction. I think Kuja is the brother of Zidane. I think Steiner and Beatrice are going to hook up. I think... in the third disc, so I usually make 5. So they're brothers. Steiner and Beatrice are going to hook up. I think Garnet is going to leave the party for like a significantly long time, and I think she's basically going to become the princess. So I think that we're not going to have Garnet in our party for like most of disc 3. I think Vivi is going to die before... I'm going to predict that Vivi dies in disc 3. And then I think Amarant is going to betray the party. So that's 5. So, brothers,
okay.
Hook up.
I will not...
Yeah, we got it.
I will not say whether any of those are accurate or not. But I will say... what you need to get to is the end of Disc 3, which is... I can't even tell you what the end of Disc 3 is because it would be a spoiler.
What?
To even say where you are in the end of Disc 3 would be a spoiler. So
Can you give us a hint? Like, give us a letter.
The game will probably say end of Disc 3. So, I mean, that will most likely be our
not for the
signal.
Steam version.
No,
so
not on the Steam version, it won't.
Give us, like, a letter. Like A, C...
you'll be in a new airship. I'll say that.
Okay.
You'll be in a new airship.
Okay.
It will be a airship unlike any of the other airships you've seen.
Got it.
And that'll be your way of knowing that you are you're at the end of Disc 3.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you once again, Pete, for humoring our madness.
Thank you, everybody who tuned in, and thank everybody who stuck around until the end.
Thank you, Zombiepie. Chris?
I'm always going to be here. I'm never free.
You're never free. So, till next time, thank you for listening. Peace!